Now in this video I'm going to go through how to create just a basic kind of desk organizer. Now the reason I'm going to show you this is because I want you to learn how to do something called components. Now components are really important in SketchUp and it's something that a lot of people overlook. Now as we go through the video you'll see why it's so important that you do create components. Basically a component is a separate part of your design work. So if you imagine all your different products, when they're actually made, they are all individual parts. So we can actually create those individual parts and make them into components. They don't have to be like completely individual pieces of acrylic or completely different pieces of timber. They can actually just be separate parts. So for our desk organizer, I'm going to start with a rectangle. And again, as I'm doing this, you can always pause these videos, try doing some of these bits and then come back to the videos afterwards and I will show you kind of those bits. So don't feel like you have to watch the entire video and then try and do this really. Okay, now I'm not doing this with measurements. Okay, this is more about getting used to the software and just showing you some useful bits. Okay, so I'm not going to use measurements at the moment. I just want to get used to actually how this works. So I've started off with my kind of basic outside shell. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to draw on this front face here. If you want to look directly at the front face, you can go to Camera, Standard View, and you can actually choose to look at it from the front here. So this means it will lock us to look directly at the front. What this means is now I'm going to be able to draw on this without it kind of confusing the software or confusing me. So the idea with this is I'm going to start adding some drawers onto here. Now I could offset this slightly if I wanted to give it an outside edge, because my material would have a thickness. Okay, that's the thing to remember, is that when you're drawing on this, essentially SketchUp has like a zero thickness. Think of it like a skin. It's very thin, so you have to make sure that you tell it to add a thickness. So if I undo that, and you can undo things by doing Control and Z. So if I try to push pull this, it will think I want to make the whole object smaller. However, if I've offset this and I choose it to be away from the edge, if I now move this, it's then going to only move the inner part, which can make it very useful for my actual design. Now what I want to do is I want to add a set of drawers. Now if I want them all to be the same kind of size, what I can do is I can draw my shape. What I'm going to do is add a cutaway afterwards when we actually make the drawers. So if I want to copy this, Control and C, which is the shortcut for copy. If you look on here and you right click, there isn't actually an option for copy, so you have to remember the shortcut is Control and C, and then Control and V will paste it, and you should see that it is the exact same size. If I line it up with this bottom corner here, I can then keep it aligned across here. If you want to make sure that yours are completely aligned, you can add just a line across here, and this will, when I paste it, mean that I've got something to lock it onto, so that I don't just randomly place them. Okay. If you want to be even more accurate, you can also add our tape measure, which we've well, I showed you in the previous video. I could actually choose how far I wanted this to be spaced apart from each other, and I can put like a little point on there, and that's just my measurement point to show me where I would need to position this. Okay, so if I did want to use a measurement from here, and let's say I want them to be, I mean, because this is quite big, I'm going to set this to 190. So just for this one, I'd set it to 190. Oh, change that again. So I'll click 190, and then you can see that it's added the dot. Then I'll do my Control Paste, and then it can lock onto there. And then I could do the same for this one here. So I could click on this endpoint, do my 190, add my dot, and then doesn't seem to want to add my dot to that one. Let's try it again. So I'll try it again. Move my mouse until I get to 190. Might be because I've got something selected, so I'll push my escape. I'll deselect everything. And I'll try that again. That's better. So part of the it didn't seem to like that I had this selected, so you probably need to deselect anything that you've got selected before you do that. Like so. And then I could decide to move these to space them out to different sizes. Because I've got them already at the right size, you can see that I can just sort of space and move them. At the moment, again, like I said, I'm just doing this roughly by eye. It's not about accuracy at the moment, it's just getting you to understand these kind of different parts and these different components. Once I've done this bit, I'm then going to, actually I'm going to move this one as well. So I'm going to rub out that line so I can move this across a bit. I'll draw the line back in. So that one goes up to here. I'll make sure it locks up to this line here. And what I can do is draw a line across here, and if I get them to overlap, I can then just rub out the extra line. Same sort of thing that you would do in 2D design. And if I go back to my camera, and I'll go back to my standard view and just look from the front again, it is good practice to make sure you're still looking for the front. And then I'll have my rectangle shape down here as well. And again, you can always move these lines to sort of get them positioned how you want them so that they are in a good position. I'll do that again. It doesn't seem to like it if I do that, so what I'll do is rub out these lines and then I'll draw them again. So again, view, my camera, standard views, front, and then I'll draw that rectangle again, like so. So once we've got these done, what I can do now is if I drag these backwards, what I'm doing is I'm going to give this enough space to have drawers in. So if I drag it to here, I don't want to go all the way through the back, so I'll do it to about there. If I want these to go back the same amount, what I can do is actually make it go to the face. If it goes to the face, what it means is it's actually going to be pulled back the same amount. So you don't want to end up with it going all the way through. So you can just hover it over that, and you should see it highlights to say on face. And what that basically means is that is lined up with it. Sometimes it will try and auto sort of fill things in when you've kind of done that. If you need to get rid of any faces, what you can do is you can actually select them and get rid of them. If, like mine's not doing, if it doesn't let you do that, what you can do is draw the face again, like so, and then I'll just click on that, delete it, pull that back again, do that on that face, and then I've got my first drawers here. Now I said to you before that we were going to look at making sure that we had components. So what I'm going to do is select all of this, and I want to treat this as its own component. I don't want it to be classed as something else, so this is its own component. So what I can now do is select all of this, and if you do component or make component, what you can do is give it a name. So I might say might call it a desk tidy base, something like that, and then I'll do create. So now that is classed as one component, so when I click it, it will select the whole thing at the same time. What this does mean now though is I can actually start drawing and designing other pieces and other parts. Now sometimes you need to see through an object, so what we can actually do is we can use tools and we can use something called a section plane. A section plane allows you to cut through objects. So I've clicked, and what it's done is it's basically drawn a plane, and if you imagine this as it's slicing through the object, so I can click the move tool, And as I move that up, you can see it reveals more or less of my design. So I want to get to this position here, because what I'm going to do is start designing the drawer that I want to go in here. And because this is a component, it then means that my parts aren't going to accidentally connect to this. If you don't do components, what can happen is it can try and merge all the pieces together. So what I'm going to do is have one side of the drawer. So I'm actually going to add them as if this was the actual sort of size of the drawer. Okay, do it like so, and I can, again like we've done before, I can select this, Control C, Control V, and paste this over here. And then what I want to do is rub out these lines here so that I've got a solid part that's going to extrude. Basically, I don't want it to be separate parts. And because I want this drawer to fit flush with the front, I could actually fill this bit back in here and then use that bit here, copy and paste, and bring that to the front, and then rub these bits out. Okay. Now, again, some of these things you sort of figure out as you go along. There are different ways of doing this. I tend to use a lot of copying and pasting because then I can make sure that my components are the right size. And I'll bring this up to just below that point there. And then what I want to do is I want to look at the front view. So again, I'm going to go to my camera, I'm going to go to my standard views, and I'm going to go to front. I'm going to add a circle in the middle. And the reason I'm going to add a circle is because I want to add a part that people can actually use their sort of fingers to grip onto. You could use a circle, or you could use an arc if you want to. So if you're going to use an arc, you'd need to draw it kind of the other way around. So what I might do, just to help me with this one, I might draw from this midpoint, and to make sure they're the same length, I am going to use measurements for this bit. I'm going to make them 560 across that way, from this midpoint 560 to the right, and then what I can do is I can arc from this end point to this end point here, draw this down, and then click, and then I've got my sort of finger groove bit here that I can then remove. Now when you drag this back, if you want to completely remove something, you'll see it says on face, and you can see it makes like a different sort of colour. It goes and changes colour. So you should see that as I'm pulling it back, all of a sudden it sort of snaps and it makes it change colour. If it goes offset limit to blah blah blah, what that means is that if I click now, it's going to delete it. So you can drag all the way back and then delete, which can be really useful for any parts that you want to remove, like cutaways like that. Now I could drag this up, and you should see that I've actually managed to make this cutaway here. And what's quite nice is if I want to pull this up, because it's not quite right, I can actually just click on it and just drag it up. I'm going to give it a tiny gap if I can. Okay, and again, you can zoom in to get more accuracy. Okay, so it's only a couple of, just a few millimeters under there. Now this is where it becomes so important that you've used components. If you don't use components, this bit won't work. So what you have to do now is if I select all of this, because I've got a component, I can hold down Shift and click the exterior, and what I'm left with is just the drawer as a component now. So now if I do make component, and I'm going to call this bottom drawer, if I now click create, it then means that that is now its own component. So I can click that, and I can select this separately as its own entity. Now, the reason that's so useful is because now, as part of my kind of development, if I wanted to show this as a different view, you can actually move these out. So if I select the drawer, and I'm going to look at this from the top view, and I want to click and move that, what it now means is I can actually show this drawer from different views. So I could actually have these parts slide out, which can be really useful for your kind of screenshots to show how you've created something. So it makes it much easier to work with. I know some people try and do it where they create the drawers already out, but it's just so much easier to do it this way as a separate component, and it saves you a lot of time, because then again I can actually take this apart completely and I can actually view this as its own component. So you can see, and you can almost do like exploded drawings because they are individual pieces. Now, if I want to edit this one, because I've noticed that this has no base on it, what I can actually do is double click on it. Oh, I'll deselect it. Oh, I've still got the move tool. So black arrow, double click it. What that then means is I'm editing this component, so nothing else matters. I can't impact this product. I'm only drawing on this. So what I'm going to do is to make this a bit of a realistic base, I don't want to just glue like a piece on the bottom because I wouldn't do that. What I would do is I would inset this where I would use like a rebate plane or a router to actually add the grooves along the bottom here. So what I'm actually going to do is offset this bottom piece like so. I'm going to pull this up to give it a sort of cavity where I would glue an actual base piece on. I'm then going to draw my actual base piece going across. So I'll go from this corner here to this corner here. Try and angle it a bit better there. So I'll get it to go there. If that hasn't filled in, what I might need to do is sometimes you have to draw like angled lines across to get it to fill in different surfaces where they're not quite aligned to each other. So now that I've filled that one in, what I can do is extrude this back down, but I'm going to rub out that line because I don't need it now that it's filled it in. And now what I'm going to do is pull this bit down and this bit onto there. So you can see that I've got my base piece that would be glued in, and it don't have to do it like that, but I just think it looks nicer to actually really think about how you're going to construct this. Okay, and if you really wanted to, you could also have your kind of lines drawn here to show that you were going to use miter joins or something like that. Okay, you could draw your finger lines on here for your finger joins. So it just allows you to really communicate and visualize how your product is going to be constructed. And there's no reason that you couldn't make each of these sides an individual component. Okay, like so. Now, I'm not going to make the other drawers in this video because I think you get the idea of this. So if you've managed to do this one and you've managed to get your drawer so that it fits in and it comes out and everything works quite well, then you can try some of the other videos and have a look at some of the other components that you can work to create.